Hello everyone, I am Allison Gonzalez and I am a trainer here at Pragmatic Works. And today in this episode of my Power Query series, we are getting into the Power Query editor and we are going into our advanced editor and checking out M the Mashup Language, the language that is behind all those amazing UI buttons that are in Power Query. So we're going to be getting into it, learning a little bit about the structure, what goes into it, and having some fun. So let's take a look first at the structure of M so we can know a little bit of what we're looking at when we get into Power Query. And of course, we are going to check out our file in Power Query in Power BI and also Power Query in Excel. So this is a lovely example of M query code that you can expect to see. Now this code comes from the advanced editor. Now there are two places where you are able to see your M query code in Power Query. Now you can see it step by step, one line at a time in your formula bar. So you would click on your applied step in the right hand side of your screen as you see all those applied steps going down. Based on the step you clicked on, you're going to see all of the M query code that was generated for that step. Now, if you've got a lot of steps, you just want to see how everything's interacting and working together, you want to go into your advanced editor. You can do this in both Power Query and Power BI and Power Query in Excel. It will look the same. And this is the structure that you will expect to see. So let's break this down into sections and see what each of these is about, how we can expect to see things. Now, for this one, we purposefully split things apart so we can easily see the distinctions and the things step by step. Now, when you look at your advanced editor, everything's going to be right up. We don't have all of these nice spaces, nicely aligned columns and sections going through, but you were able to do this on your own. And as we go through, I will show you the marks of the sections and where you can kind of put those tabs or spaces in to make it a little bit more organized and easier to understand. And no, it will not affect your end result whatsoever. All we'll do is make it easier for you to see. So when we are looking at this, our first part, that very top section, this is our let expression. Now our let expression kind of has all of the commands of what we want to do. All of the details, all of the nitty gritty, everything that we've done in our code is going to be in that let expression. At the bottom is our in expression, and we're going to get to that once we get through all of the things that we see here in our let expression. So the let expression contains a bunch of different sections inside of it. The first one of those is this named expression or variable. Now, if you are used to looking at your applied steps in Power Query, you'll really recognize these names like the promoted headers, changed types, extracted years, because whatever is showing up right there in those quotes, that is exactly what you can expect to see in your applied steps. So your source kind of stands by itself. Your source is normally named your source. And so your source does not need to be in your kind of hashtag or number sign and then quotes. But every line after your source will do that. So we can see after our source, we have that, structure of that hashtag or number sign, whatever you prefer to call it, and your quotes. And then whatever is in those quotes exactly is going to appear in your applied steps as the name of that. And you can go back and rename your applied steps. So if you have multiples of the same things and you want to make it more clear what happened in one of them, go for it. It's just really the name and it has no effect on what is happening in that code. Now, of course, if you delete the line, that's going to change things, but you can definitely change the name in the applied steps to make it more clear for what you're doing there if you've got a lot of them in your applied steps. The next section is your M function, and this is where it gets to the actual code part or the function that we are doing in our whole M query code here. Now we can see that this has table dot in front of all of mine, and that's just showing that everything done in this code was done to a table. So to that table, it promoted the headers, it transformed the column types, it transformed columns, it split the columns. All of those specific things were done to a table. And so that promote headers, transform column types, that's really the command. It's the action that we're requiring at that step. Now, moving to the next section, this kind of takes a little brief departure from our purpose to kind of just throw it back, because M is really kind of like a chain reaction. We are always referencing the previous step on our new line. So as we go through every single step, we'll always, after our command, it's always going to reference that previous step. And then after that previous step, everything after this column that references the previous step, everything after this, that is all the actual nitty-gritty details of what we are doing over here. So everything that we see that is coming after this comma, all of that we can see goes right back to this command that we have here. So to actually do all the steps, all of the details of like, okay, well, what column did we split, or where did we promote our headers? All of those details, we're gonna just kind of jump over that previous step reference to get the details for that. But kind of sandwiched in between there, we're always referencing our previous step reference. And then we end things out with our in expression. This is our output. So all of our instructions are in our let expression. And then to finish it off, our in expression, look at that. It is our very last applied step that we're referencing there. Our very last step is going to be our in expression, and that creates that kind of trigger for that chain reaction to occur where we have that grouped rows as our very last thing in our in expression. But there it is, right above it, that is the very last thing. And so as we go through, we will see one by one, we will see that kind of reaction that will set that off, and we'll kind of go back and forth for all of these. And so all of those steps are done to all of the data once we do that close and apply or close and load, depending on what Power Query we're in. So that is the entire structure, everything that we are looking at, all of the parts that are in M. Now let's go take a look at the advanced editor as well as the formula bar in our Power Query file. Now we're going to look at this file, one that we actually worked on in our very first episode of our Power Query series. We're going to take another look at that in Power Query in Excel and Power BI, and we are going to go into the advanced editor to see what that code looks like. So we'll see all of these sections in that code. All right, so a little refresher, here is where we pulled all of our code from. It's coming from this giant file. It's an AdventureWorks dataset, one of Microsoft's data sets. And we pulled specifically just our customer table in. Got a ton of things going on here. And then once we cleaned it up, took it into Power Query, here is what we ended up with. And we cleaned things up. We got rid of extra things we didn't need. We created a new column. But let's go take a look in Power Query at our advanced editor. So to get back into Power Query, you're going to go to your data ribbon, you're going to go to get data and launch Power Query editor. Now, once this opens up, we will see, first off, we'll go applied step by applied step. All right, and here is our table. Here's what we ended up with. Let's go one by one through our applied steps, see what this looks like here in our formula bar. Because based on the step that we are in, we are going to see that step and that step only here in our formula bar. So this is fine if you're just looking at something short, like the source of where our file is coming from. And even this navigation of just choosing one item off of that, where we can see we're pulling the customer, and that is a sheet. You can see the next of promoted headers, where we're doing table dot, because this is to a table, and it's showing that it was done to that customer sheet, and it's promoting all. You can see we changed the type, and now this is where we're getting into more of the reference, where kind of the example that we're looking at. You can see each of these kind of parts to it one by one. We're getting kind of really long, where we're going into every single one of the columns that we had, seeing the type change we put there. You can see where we removed columns, seeing the columns that we selected to keep. So it shows the ones we selected versus the ones we removed. So a little bit different. We did a kind of a remove column, but it just shows the ones we kept here. Again, showing change type. Our previous step was right there. Here we have a new column that we added, and we did an add column from examples to bring in the full name from the first name and the last name. You can see that remove other columns was our previous step. You can see we rearranged our columns and the order that we arranged them. And we also went through and added spaces, so we renamed all of those columns. Now we can see all of this one by one, but if I really want to get a good look at this and really understand how everything relates to it, let's go to our advanced editor. So our advanced editor is right here. This is in your home ribbon. So we click on that advanced editor button, it is going to launch a new window. If you have a really large section of code, especially small window, you can always maximize that so that is all you're looking at and you can really focus on it. Now we can see we have kind of those marks for our let expression and our in expression. And the only thing in our in expression is always going to be the very last step here, including your number sign and your quotes wrapping around it. So let's speed this out a little bit, take a better look and see how we can move things around to make this a little bit more obvious of what we're doing, especially as we're getting used to our M code structure. So these first two are source and kind of where we're pulling from that source. I'm going to leave just in that same structure. I could definitely bump these out, move the equal signs over, but I really like to kind of show these as separate ones. For me, because we're not really referencing as much of the previous one, I'm good with kind of leaving those as is. Now, for these next ones, I do want to kind of bump these out. And so I generally just look for before the equal sign. That is my first mark. And I find whatever my furthest one, my longest named expression, whatever one that is, and space out a bit from there. That way everything else I know is going to kind of fit. I won't have to like redo it as much. So again, this is not going to change how your code functions, as long as you are spacing things out from the correct spaces. If I tried to put a space in the middle of this, that's gonna break things. So you wanna make sure you are spacing it just at kind of your edges of things. So right before it starts or right after, that way you are getting it to the right one. And there's no real science to this. You're really just gonna tab or space just based on how much space you want to have. And so even those first ones, I could kind of mark these over. And of course, you always run the risk of going the wrong direction. So just keep an extra eye on what you're doing. If you're ever unsure, you're like, I might have taken a comma out there, a column, or just something I need. Always do that Control-Z, that undo, just to make sure you're not accidentally introducing an error in as you're spacing things out. But you can either leave these kind of first two lines apart together, do kind of a mishmash of that, just depending on what you want to see, so you can kind of better understand your data and how it works best for you. Now our second section is the M function. So I can see this M function here is our promoted headers. So right before the parenthesis, so wherever your last letter starts and comes up to that parenthesis, that's where you're going to put your spacing into. So I can see right between these two would be where I would create that space. So your last letter and the parenthesis, last letter, first parenthesis, all the way through. Now you will, even if you don't actually change the code, even just doing these few changes will require you to kind of save this. And it will have like minimal spacing changes in your formula bar. Definitely not as much as you're doing in here, but you will see it like slightly adjusted in your formula bar, but it won't actually change your code. So we can see here we've got that named expression, that variable in our first part. We have the M function of kind of the command, our instructions at what we're doing. Now we're into our previous step reference. So everything between our first parenthesis and the comma, so our first parenthesis and the comma, that is all your previous step reference. So that all together is your previous step reference. So between the comma and the next, it could be a bracket, it could be a curly bracket, whatever is but after that comma. It's right after that comma. It's kind of your next line of demarcation that you want to move things over. So even here, we just have quotes. Over here, we've got another curly bracket. I'm going to space those out just a little bit more so everything can breathe just a bit better. Now, here is all of our steps, all spaced out, all really easy to see and understand. This first comma, This is our named expression or variable. Let's put that under our let expression. There we go. This is all that named expression or variable. Our next part here, everything after that equal sign up to the parenthesis, that is all the M function, the actual command that we are doing. Everything from the parenthesis to that first comma, that is all of your previous step reference. So throw in a back a step so we get that chain reaction moving. And then everything after that, all of the other details, everything else that is going on after that comma, this is all the nitty-gritty details of what is actually happening. So this part refers right back to here. So we take a little break in between that M function and our actual instructions for what's happening with that step to mention the previous one. And then finally, all the way at our bottom, here we have our in expression. And this in expression is always our last named expression there. So this is the structure of your M. You can break it up so you can space it out and remember those kind of keys. So right before your equal sign, right before the first parenthesis, and then right after that comma. And those are going to be the different sections. Your let expression, of course, has all of those top ones, your named expression, your M function, your previous step reference, and then your details. And then that last part is your or your in expression, your output, that kind of triggers the whole thing. So here's our basis, here's what you see. Let's go take a look at this in Power Query, in Power BI. So first, when we hit done on this, we can see it gives us some spacing here. None of our details change. Like all of our steps still work, everything is still functioning, we don't have any errors, but we do have a few extra spaces here. Definitely not as many as we spaced out in the advanced editor, but you will see a few spaces, so just be prepared for that and not worried at all. Let's do our close unload. Take that back on in, and then let's go check out Power BI. All right, so in Power BI, to get into Power Query, we're going to hit that top of the Transform Data button. That is going to launch Power Query for us. All right, so here we can see that same setup. It is that same data set. It's pulling from the customer table on AdventureWorks. We can see all of our applied steps here. Now, if you do not see your formula bar, and it's the same in Excel, over in your view ribbon, you can go to turn it on. So if you are like, where in the world, I really want to see the formula bar to see all of the steps that I'm doing, over on your view ribbon. And a lot of times, sometimes if you'll do updates, it might turn this off, or you're just opening a random file, it looks a little bit different. So if you ever lose your formula bar, go on over to your view ribbon. Once you click on that, it's gonna pop right up. And here we can see all of those same steps that we looked at as we're going through Power Query in Excel. So all the way down. And of course, if I want to look at my advanced editor, again, here on my home ribbon, just like in Power Query and in Excel, slightly over, we got a few, I never know. I'm always so curious why, when they did Power BI, they adjusted this home ribbon. I feel like it would have been easier if they just kept it the same, but I don't know. There might be something on the back end that it's affecting. So our advanced editor used to be like right over here in Power Query in Excel. It's just slightly over from that, closer to the middle. So let's open this up and we can see our structure looks exactly the same. And I can do the same thing if I wanted to in here, where I can space everything out. I'm just gonna do a few just to kind of do that same demarcation, not do all of them, but kind of just talk about the spaces we're moving. So again, with this, the very first section here is your named expression. Whatever is over here, that is what is showing up in Power Query. Your next part, everything from the equal sign up to your first parenthesis, that is your M function, that's a command, that is what we are telling it to do, what we want to happen in this step. We then have our previous step reference here. So our previous step reference, it's kind of this chain reaction that's going on as we're going through Power Query in this M language. And then that final part is, of course, what are we doing? The nitty-gritty details that are happening over here. And then we're ending it all off with our in expression, that output, which is always referencing the very last named expression or variable. So our M is the same way as the mashup language, just named for the mashup of data sources that we can get in Power Query. This structure, it's a few other places, a few other programs in Microsoft where this is utilized. You can expect to see this code structure the same in both. So thank you all so much for joining me in this video in my Power Query series. If you found it helpful, make sure you like it and of course subscribe to get the most up-to-date info when we release additional videos. So here on our channel, we go over all Microsoft programs with a big focus and hundreds of videos on the Power Platform. So if you are learning M, using it, please comment how this has helped you below. So happy learning, and I will see you all next time.